Greetings, everyone. I am Jaffery, and I welcome you to this section started by Ambassador Abdul Basit with a view to inculcating among the youth of Pakistan the habit of reading. Reading has become all the more important, especially at a time when the war of narratives is fast becoming more critical than a war between combatants on the battlefield. Not that it was not critical before, but the idea here is that only through reading can you develop an understanding which then can be used to effectively present your country's case uh, globally, because that is what we have been lacking uh, since the past so many decades. Uh, I will start off this series with a 2018 book authored by Dr. Rabia Akhtar entitled The Blind Eye US Non-Proliferation Policy Towards Pakistan from Fort to Clinton. Uh, this is the book. The book is fortunately available for download on the University of Lahore Press website, um, and I urge you all to um, get the book from there. I have chosen this book for two particular reasons. One, the non-proliferation regime, of which the US claims to be the leader and the torchbearer, is under many a threat. The the set of threats emanate from North Korea, a country that left the NPT and went on to develop a nuclear deterrent of its own, and Iran, a country that is very much part of the NPT, but the nuclear rivalry between the US and Iran is still a cause of concern for global security and for, of course, regional security. And the other important reason as to why I have picked this book to discuss with you is that Pak Pak US relations are once again entering a low expectation and low priority phase, with the US about to leave Afghanistan. I'll start off with the second reason, but before that, I want to stress that the first thing that one should note while discussing and reading academic books is the methodology adopted by the author or authors if the book is co-authored, because that really sets the tone and that really tells us a lot about how the book is to go. And the methodology is also essential in understanding as to where the book stands in terms of original research. So this book is a product of a rigorous uh, archival research that the author conducted. The author uh, consulted 5 US presidential libraries, um, starting from the library of President Ford till um, the library of President Bill Clinton. And she also consulted the archives of 3 prominent US lawmakers in Stuart Symington, John Glenn, and Stephen Solars, who were instrumental in shaping US non-proliferation policies, especially those that pertain to Pakistan. Um, you might be thinking that why didn't the author consult the library of Larry Pressler, the archives of Larry Pressler? Um, the answer, the issue with that was that the archives have not been opened as yet, but sufficient material was available in the other archives about that. Um, Now to the main argument of the book. which relates to the second part of the second reason as to why I picked the book. Pakistan has always believed that the US used it for its strategic interest, and whenever the interests were no longer um, important for the US left Pakistan high and dry. I would not call the narrative entirely untrue, but after once you read this book, you'll perhaps understand that this narrative needs a reset. So the author academically argues that it is not only the US that used Pakistan, Pakistan also used the US, and that too, in the words of the author, more adeptly. Pakistan got more than what it had bargained for. And the author says this because uh, the US gave Pakistan tactical leeway because Pakistan was helping it fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, or rather, fight the last battle of the 4 decades long Cold War. Uh, but Pakistan used those windows to not only expand its conventional military firepower, but also in the process develop a nuclear deterrent of its own, with a view to achieving strategic parity. So Pakistan adeptly, as the author says, um, used that decade of the 1980s for its own strategic interest. And while both countries had many a lever to pull on each other, Pakistan was better able to extricate more out of out of the leverage that it had over the years. Um, the narrative surrounding Pak-US relations is always spoken of, or always um, you know brought to the fore when an event ends. So Pakistan's narrative regarding the US duplicity or the US turning away from Pakistan um, is more is heard it is heard more of when we discuss the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. So what sets this book apart from other books on Pak-US relations, which have some very catchy titles like Disenchanted Allies, like Magnificent Delusions, like Limits of Influence, and whatnot, is that chapters 4 and 5 in this book tell us a new story. The story is that even after the US left Pakistan, left the region, and it lost interest in Pakistan, um, it continued to find out ways to help Pakistan, and that too at a time when Pakistan was speeding ahead with its nuclear weapons program. So, be it President Bush's efforts to help Pakistan get commercial military sales, or be it President Clinton's efforts to support the Brown Amendment, the US did, knowing full well the status of Pakistan's nuclear weapons program, help Pakistan and keep the relationship going. So with that, we come to a very important conclusion. The conclusion is that the US, for all the talk of its being the leader of the global non-proliferation regime, does compromise on its non-proliferation goals, which, according to it, are very noble. And it compromises on those goals because it has some geopolitical interests and goals to meet. And here, what we need to understand is, and once you read the book, you'll understand in a better manner, is that if you keep geopolitics and non-proliferation on a pendulum, for the US, geopolitical interests outweigh those of non-proliferation. And this is why we need to understand US's intent on bringing India into the global nuclear commerce mainstream. We need to understand that a book of history is a treat to read when it helps readers automatically connect the events of the past with the current happenings. So if you look at how the US bent over backwards and gave India um, a great gift in shape of the Indo-US nuclear deal by tinkering with its laws and enacting the Hyde Amendment, um, you do realize that this is exactly what the US, in a different manner, did with Pakistan in the 80s, and even continued in a way and to a degree in the 90s as well. So when you talk about US duplicity, when you talk about US favoring a particular country at the expense of the other, you need to understand how the US operates. And if you need to understand how the US operates and what its modus operandi is, you need to read books. And this is a very good starting point. Um, and it will give you answers to many a question related to these disciplines. Um, the last thing that I want to say about this book is that um it is an archival research, as I said earlier. Um, Archival research opens up vistas of new research. And if Pakistan has to tell its story to the world, which is a true one, Pakistan has to be much more forthcoming um, about opening up its archives and allowing researchers to do quality research, because no information leads to misinformation. We need to get our word out, and we can't get our word out if we keep our archives closed, and if we do not let people read what our diplomats, military officials, and politicians have done for this country. And I'll end with this note that this book is also a scholarly acknowledgement of people who were part of our efforts to go nuclear. And this book has convincingly argued that no leader, military or civilian, compromised on Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. It also tells us about the heroics of our diplomats and our military officials who, look, the blind eye was turned partly because Pakistani policymakers negotiated in a very tough manner with the US interlocutors. And the book, when you'll read it, you'll understand as to how Pakistani officials did that. Uh, I was reminded, I'm reminded of a term that President Trump used when he met Imran Khan in 2019. He said, "Pakistanis are very tough negotiators," and this book will tell you a lot about that, as to how tough Pakistani negotiators are and have been, especially with the US, because they were inspired and fueled by um, Pakistan's core national security interest, which at that time was to uh, bear its own teeth and give India a strategic response, um, and attain strategic parity. So I'll end here. I look forward to discussing another book with you next time when we meet. Thank you.